Hello, YouTube. 1 minute, as always. I'll take my time with this time, though. Okay. You have to keep in mind, I usually drank quite heavily before I made these videos to relieve stress. You have to keep in mind, I usually drank quite heavily before I make these videos to relieve stress, but nevertheless, this is going to be about presidents worse than Trump. And this is episode 3 of this series. And we're going to be talking about OW. Next time around will be He'll Bomb You. But for now, we're talking about a man who truly never met a landmass he didn't want to drop bombs on, and or a kindergarten he didn't think about blowing up, George W. Bush. A president so horrible, so incompetent, that I didn't even bother brushing up on history. I didn't need to. He's still fresh in all our minds. And he is truly the worst president in the history of the United States. And like I said before, unless you're talking about someone like Hitler, other than people like that, I'm talking about actual presidents with some level of democratic legitimacy. As far as any president that actually fits that standard goes, he is the worst president in American history. Worse than Obama, worse than Bill Clinton, worse than Reagan, even worse than Nixon. The worst president in American history. And this video kind of just makes itself. So let's get right into this. George W. Bush is a former president and or former governor of Texas. I want to talk about that before. 1 second. Those are the pop-ups. Oh yeah, yes, I'm sure you're eager to please, because then you're probably a robot who does this. All right, let's see. Anyways, the former governor of Texas, who, by the way, in spite of all the big shitting hypocrite, fucking redneck sheriff lingo and war on terror and straight shooter, I'm the sheriff bullshit that he used to sell you. He was in fact a rich kid born to a former head of the CIA in Connecticut, and was born in Connecticut, if I'm not mistaken. And mind you, when he talks about picking a fight and he wants to war on terror, he's not talking about going and fighting Saddam or someone like that himself. No, he wants to send your children to go fight. That's what he really wants. He's a rich old man sending poor young men off to die in his stupid bullshit wars. But nevertheless, he talked about, the point is, while as governor, he passed a 3-5-year outlaw. He started trying juveniles as adults, and he executed a retarded man. Very, very nice person George Bush is, wouldn't you say? Let's give this motherfucker a hand of applause. But see, he's such a good, charitable citizen. Now he sits outside of Walmarts and tells people hi. Once, like 5 years ago. Real nice guy. Is to where, I don't know, an actual president that really did give a fuck about you, and a real Christian, by the way, Jimmy Carter. He spent his days after his White House days, even though you only elected him 1 term in office, helping build homes or housing for the poor. He helped build houses for the poor, and he still does that. And he wrote a fucking book in defense of Palestine and talking about the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip in Palestine. That's how he spends it. That was pretty controversial at the time, and that's how he spends his days post White House versus a fucking crook who, next to Obama, took more golf vacation days than any president in history. And by the way, like George Carlin used to say, who in the hell could play golf? I know fucking Trump likes golf. It's like if you can play golf, it's like watching 2 flies fuck. You could literally do that. You must be doped up out of your mind on Ritalin or something. It's impossible. I mean, don't get me wrong, golf courses are pretty. There's a lot of green. It's kind of like in the history of the world with the king snorting cocaine. He looks around, everything's so green. I can understand that, but I don't care about playing the game. It's like, if you make a hole-in-one, or even just find the damn thing, you should consider it a victory just because you found the damn thing. I mean, if you're going to play golf, it's kind of like fucking Caddyshack. If you're going to play a fucking golf game, make it mini golf. I can understand that better, but that's not the point. Anyways, getting back to the point. George Bush executed a retarded man. And like I said, and I want to make something clear, even though in the past, because I was at one time a Satanist, though I'm a Luciferian now, I'm a humanist more or less. But in the past, I was rather really an agnostic. I did not know if there was a Satan or whether or not Satan exists, and I still really do not know that. But I was an atheistic Satanist, LaVeyan Satanist, and they have a ideal. They have a law. They have a rule of thumb called Abrix Honest, that the punishment should be fitting the crime, and or what the Bible would call eye for an eye. I no longer believe in that when it comes to the death penalty. I don't think that we should repay that kind of evil with that kind of evil, at least not when you're allowing the state to do that. Because once you give the state that kind of monolithic, megalomaniacal, ultra extreme power, they can do whatever they want with it, really. And today it's murderers and more this group, that group, and whatever group. And we're already going in that direction, I fear. But I think you're seeing that with Alabama, where they're chopping up pedophile politics. I mean, whether you like them or not, again, we're getting closer and closer to back to the Victorian era, where if you stole a loaf of bread, they'd hang you in the city square. We're getting there eventually. Because, you know, hey, fuck it. Fuck the new age, fuck the new era, the new aeon, fuck enlightenment, the Enlightenment, and the Renaissance. Let's just go back to, you know, dark ages, medieval bullshit. But in any event, I am against the death penalty. And by the way, whether you like this or not, I'm against the death penalty for everyone. I don't care if it's a hate crime or anything else, or if you don't like that specific group more than you don't like this other specific group. I really don't give a fuck. I don't think we should execute anyone, including terrorists. I don't think we should execute even people that commit treason. I don't believe in the death penalty. With the one exception of how depraved was the crime, how barbaric, brutal, inhumane was the killings, how long did it last, especially if children are involved. Then I think if you have a case where someone's torturing children, for example, okay, maybe that son of a bitch should hang. But for the most part, I don't fucking support that. I don't think we should fucking execute people. And again, I don't believe in that. And like Dylan Roof, that guy who shot up that church or whatever it was, that black church. Hey, I don't like the motherfucker. He shouldn't fucking be executed. No one should be executed, no matter really what they did, except for the very, very worst of the bunch. The guy in Charlottesville shouldn't be executed. Only the very worst murderers who rapists and people who do really horrible shit, and I'm talking about the worst shit possible, only they should fucking be executed. This is largely a punishment. It's someone that has totally committed such acts of inhumanity, they have turned in their human being status, and they have turned in their human being card, and all that is left to do is put them out of their misery. Other than that, I think this is a punishment that should go the way of the dinosaur. But of course, instead of doing that, you're bringing back castration as a punishment. I was going to say genital mutilation, but you already had that because of circumcision, so you've already been doing that. You do circumcision for no reason. So, anyways, the point is, I'm against the death penalty, but he executed George W. Bush. Back to the point. That's how I started talking about this. Executed a retarded man. Yes, he did. A man in prison, executed him in Texas. 3 strikes, you're out. Devastated parts of the community, parts of the inner city and black community. You can literally be committing a nonviolent offense, an offense that may get you only a small time in prison, but if it's your 3rd crime of any kind, then you're fucked in Texas because of George W. Cocksucker Bush. So let's see, what else is there to talk about here, really? Okay, so he does that. He's governor, not from Texas, pretends to be a sheriff, wants to send your kids to go fight, but he gets in the fucking White House, he runs at that time at least, supposedly, on a non-foreign interventionist policy, much of what Ron Paul ran on. He gets in the fucking office, and what does he do? First thing he does, gets us into the Afghan war. Why? Because 9/11. Okay, who was in charge of 9/11? Who was president? By the way, I should have talked about this with Bill Clinton, but I ran out of time, really. But Bill Clinton, and I didn't really remember, but Bill Clinton pretty much knew about 9/11. Bush certainly knew about 9/11. They knew where the damn Osama bin Laden was. I believe it was CNN sent film crews to interview Osama bin Laden in his cave, because there was a point where he was living in a cave. Believe it or not, that's more than a myth. That was actually correct. But the point is, they sent film crews, so they knew who the motherfucker was, and they didn't do anything to go get him, and they knew there could be a terrorist attack or act of terror in the United States of America. And they didn't do anything. And on the day of the attacks, mind you, and they were surveilling. The fucking point is, they knew about the 9/11 hijackers. They had been watching them, spying on them. They knew that they probably had plans to carry out terrorist attacks in America. They had been investigating them. and monitoring their activity. And guess what happens at the end of the fucking day? 9/11 happens. They knew all about them. They had been tracking them. They all had U.S. passports. They knew who they were. They were on a U.S. terrorist watch list, even at that point. Granted, their watch list wasn't as efficient because we weren't putting 5-year-old girls on the watch list because they might be terrorists. We hadn't gotten that stupid yet, but we had a watch list, and they had already tried to attack the Twin Towers once back in '92, and no one did jack shit to try to prevent this activity again from happening. And of course, I believe the original attack was under the first Bush. And by the way, to the day of 9/11, you might be interested in knowing that was 1 year, I believe, to the day George H.W. Bush gave his infamous New World Order speech. And then 9/11 happens 10 years to the day, a decade to the day of that, under his son, who, by the way, had a vice president and other members of staff or cabinet members who were a part of the founding group of the Project for the New American Century that was a neoconservative, a neocon, pretty much group of war hawks that wanted war. And they talked about, and I'm not saying they did anything, but they talked about instigating wars and using a terrorist type activity on the scale of a Pearl Harbor, if not worse, and this was worse than Pearl Harbor, in order to goddamn get us in these wars. And they would be looking for people in caves and shit to justify these wars as a way of branching off and exploring new territories and setting up corporations, banks. And they talked about doing that. And then sure enough, 9/11 happens under fucking George Bush. Okay, so they do that. Then they talking about weapons of mass destruction. And we go into Afghanistan, by the way, and guess what? It wasn't until 11 years later, who, as I will talk about later, under Obama, who's no prize himself, like I said, I'll talk about it later. But under Obama, or under Obama, they finally do find Osama bin Laden, supposedly. But guess what? They don't find him in Afghanistan. They found him, like, way, way, way away from that, over in Palestine, in a fucking compound, and not in the motherfucking Afghanistan that we were at war with for all those fucking years, and we're still policing now. And if you know anything about the U.S. drug trade, and I talked about Reagan being involved in the CIA bringing drugs into the United States, and how they pretty much use crack cocaine to corrupt the black community, by the way. If you know anything about that, then you know that they're growing opium over in fucking Afghanistan right now. U.S. troops are. I'm sorry to tell you that about your soldiers. They're growing fucking opium there, supposedly to keep the terrorists from making money. No, so you can sell it back to fucking poor people in the United States, white, black, whoever they are. You want to sell them fucking drugs, harmful drugs that can kill them. And then once you catch them with the drugs, whether they're selling it, using it, or whatever, you want to stick them in prisons, private prisons, for as long as you can with your bullshit laws and your stiff sentencing. Just like the 3 strikes, you're outlaw. And they want to stick you in prison for as long as they fucking can, so they have reason to build more fucking prisons and house more criminals, so they can get taxpayers to get them fork in more money, and they can make a profit, building up these fucking prisons to put innocent people that have a drug addiction or a drug problem or something of that nature, or they're poor and they want to make some change off this shit that you're shipping into the country to begin with anyways. So that's the real reason why we're over in Afghanistan. It's got jack shit to do with stopping the Taliban from retaking power. It certainly had nothing to do with keeping Osama bin Laden, out of power. That's bullshit. Or to catching him. That's bullshit. That was just an excuse to go in and invade. But then we turn our attention to Iraq. Iraq, by the way, Saddam Hussein, who love him or hate him, he hated Osama bin Laden, was hated by Osama bin Laden. And furthermore, more importantly than that, he was keeping terrorists out of the region. He was terrorists' worst nightmare in that region. And while doing this, as a result of all this, we go into Iraq and we overthrow Saddam. We topple that region. The same thing George H.W. Bush tried to do many years earlier. And many people forget about this, by the way. But I do believe there was a death threat or an attempted assassination against George H.W. Bush initially back during the Gulf War by Saddam Hussein, supposedly. And this might have also been a revenge plot by Bush because he wanted revenge against Saddam for his father. Well, that's all great and good for him. I tell you what, we'll put on some boxing gloves and Saddam can have a fucking celebrity boxing match, or you know what, man? You can have a gladiator style fight to the death right now. I don't give a shit. But you shouldn't be able to, and you shouldn't get to send other people's kids to go fight your fucking war. 1 minute. but you shouldn't be able to send other people's kids to fight your fucking war. But anyways, they did all that. And we went in. There was no weapons of mass destruction. This stupid country voted him in tries because we just don't learn. We're always the last to learn anything. Europe hated the damn man. He brought absolute fucking disgrace upon the country. You fucking retards don't learn. You never learn. And you're fucking still back to supporting this asshole. He beats Kerry. He's still in damn power during the second term in office. You finally learn what an idiot he is. And before he finally leaves, he collapses your entire economy. And by the way, the minute the fucking prick took power, we went from having an economic surplus that, like I said, where I'm not sure if I said this, Clinton did not have nearly as much to do with it. They act like. Talking about Clinton, he did not have as much to do with that. There was a fall of the Berlin Wall. The Soviet Union had collapsed. There was the rise of the internet. There was just a good time to make money. There was a peacetime, pretty much. There was a lot of reasons we made money in the 90s, or people had a good economy in the 90s. And it was probably overstated, overrated, but rather, anyways, the point is, Clinton didn't have as much to do with that, but you did have an economic surplus that Clinton handed him, whether it was Clinton's fault or not. We had an economic surplus. Bush fucked that up first year on the job, not even a year in office, pretty much already, and he's already fucked that up. And we had an economic recession. And then the Republicans tried to stick Clinton to blame for that. Oh, no. That was just as much Bush's fault as it was Clinton's or anyone else's. And if not, then explain to me how 8 fucking years later, you collapsed the entire United States economy. And for the first time since the 1930s, we were headed towards and we're on the verge of a goddamn Great Depression. Explain that shit, assholes. And by the way, keep in mind, mind you, you had people living in fucking tent cities. And then meanwhile, this cocksucker is taxing whatever is left of the middle class to bail out these fucking banks that should be in prison. The damn bank should have been nationalized. They should have turned over to the public. They should have been nationalization of these banks that have been ripping off and fucking the public. But instead of doing that, instead of that happening, you bailed them out. And then Obama gets his fucking ass in there, bails them out twice, bails them out again. With your U.S. fucking tax dollar. The same tax dollars that go to support these stupid wars and a bunch of other shit. Whether it's genital mutilation over in Africa, at the same time they're complaining about female genital mutilation, they're supporting male genital mutilation, and or whatever other garbage these fucking idiots do. They waste your fucking money. They spend your money, they waste it, they're pissing in your face. It's bullshit. And then they want to complain about some welfare, some mother with 3 kids on welfare living somewhere because she's trying to live. Or they want to complain about a homeless guy who maybe has a little bit of a drug problem or something. And they want to bitch about that and act like that's the problem. And not people like George Bush and these massive corporations that are fucking you in the ass every single day of your life. So there's that. And then, like I said before, it's all over. Collapse the entire fucking economy. And that's George Bush's presidency in a nutshell. And he is the worst, shittiest fucking president in American history. And now, in the next video, when I make that, I'll talk about Obama or Albania. I'll talk about that fucking asshole and how he's not much better. And by the way, they named him right Hussein. Hussein, not you. But I will talk about how he, regardless of his skin color, political dynamic, political affiliation, what letters in front of his name or anything else, I will talk about how this fucking jerk is not much fucking better than Bush. And how they're probably related and a lot of other shit because they all are. They're all fucking cousins and they're fucking us in the ass. T666. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Again, who was a president worse than fucking Trump? And or this is another episode of presidents worse than Trump and or one being George W. Bush. What is presidents worse than Trump? George W. Bush. T666.